So now that we've talked about mental models, let's quickly recap how mental models can both be functional as well as dysfunctional, right? We saw the example in the Rosenthal experiment. How is it functional? You hold a mental model, you hold an idea that a child is a star, a genius. You land up influencing the behavior of that child. You hold a mental model about yourself. I am good at XYZ activity. You land up enhancing your own performance in the same activity. What happens if you hold a mental model that doesn't work to your advantage? What happens when you hold a mental model that this child is always late, or this child is a slacker? What is the combination effect of confirmation bias and bounded awareness going to do in this case? It's going to set up the expectation in your mind that this child is going to behave in a way that displays slackiness. You're going to notice the instances when the child behaves slackiness and point out those instances. And you're probably more likely to not notice the times when the child is not displaying slackiness, just like we missed the gorilla in the gorilla video that we saw earlier, yeah, because of confirmation bias, and you would not point those out. What is the sort of information and reinforcement that the child will get or the other person is getting? That I am a slacker, I am so and so. And that plays out, that forms a part of the child's mental model, and that plays out through confirmation bias into the child's action, reinforcing that behavior and thereby creating that reality. Now, here's something that we need to talk about when we're talking about mental models, when we're talking about this whole idea of the self-fulfilling loop that gets set up because of confirmation bias combined with bounded awareness, sense-making and mental models. We want to talk about, I'm going to talk about the subjective nature of reality. Now I know it sounds very philosophical, it sounds like, oh my God, what is she talking about? But bear with me for a minute as I tell you a story, right? This is probably a story that a lot of you have heard before, but let's revisit the story in the light of what we've just been talking about: mental models, bounded awareness, confirmation bias and sense making, especially in the context of bounded awareness. So this is a story of 4 men in a dark room who are trying to make sense of what's there. Now what happened to be in the dark room is an elephant, a big elephant. And these 4 men happen to be standing at different parts of the elephant. So there's one man, the first man is standing near the trunk of the elephant. So he is, he's feeling, it's a dark room, so nobody can see anything. They can only use their senses of touch. So he's touching the trunk of the elephant and he's saying, oh, this is something rough, hairy, kind of cylindrical, like a big fat rope that's swinging around. Yeah. There's the second person who's standing, and he happens to be standing near the tail of the elephant. So he puts his hand out, he gets the tail, saying, okay, it's hairy, it's rough, it's thin, it's swinging, it's like a thin rope that's, really swinging around. It is like a rope. The third person happens to be standing near one of the legs of the elephant. So he is touching and he's saying, this is rough, this is hairy, it's cylindrical, it's a bit like a tree, but it's on the ground and it's solid. Fourth person happens to be standing near one of the ears of the elephant. He's stroking it and saying, yes, it is hairy. It's kind of rough, kind of smooth, but it's very flat, something like a banana leaf, something that's flapping, not at all cylindrical. And then the 4 men, they come out of the room and they have a discussion. Together they're trying to understand and make sense and talk to one another about what was in the room. And they're arguing. So some of them are agreeing that it's cylindrical, some are agreeing it's hairy, some are agreeing it's rough, but they're not all agreeing about everything. It's a fascinating story because what I love about the story is that none of these 4 men are lying. They're talking about different things, they're disagreeing. There's conflict because they've all perceived different things. They've perceived different realities and they're expressing what they've perceived as their truth. Each one of them is expressing their truth. No one's lying. But they're not seeing eye to eye. Why is that? Because each one of them has their own version of the truth. And that is that to me forms the essence of subjective reality versus objective reality. So we're not even going to explore or get into the question of does there exist an objective reality out there or not. Let's leave that question out for now. Let's leave it to philosophers. We might be philosophers, but let's not philosophize on that now. Let's just challenge ourselves and ask ourselves, even if there is an objective reality, do I, as a human being, have access to that objective reality? Like the 4 men in the dark room, none of them had access to the total reality. They had access to a part of it, which is why they came away with their own mental model of what was in their own sense making as well of what was in the room. It was their version of the truth. So it is a truth, not the truth. What was the truth? The truth was that it was an elephant. But a truth was what each one of them had. And that is how we go, we run, walk, conduct ourselves through our daily lives and our activities with our versions of a truth, not the truth. Our versions of a reality, not the reality. Our version of a world that we live in, which is not necessarily the world that we live in. And it all stems from the simple notion that we have access to a subset of the information that's out there. The men had access to a subset of the elephant. They didn't see the entire elephant. What is bounded awareness? What is this lens suggesting? We have access to a subset of all the information that's outside of us. Therefore, we are constructing a reality. And why is the reality that I construct my reality, and why is it different from the reality that you would construct if we were present in the same scenario? Because our lenses are different, our mental models are different, our processes of sense making are different, the basic associations that we have learned and developed since childhood are different. So the basic associations that I hold in my mind are unique to me. My mental models are unique to me. Yes, some of them are shared by culture. So it's possible that I might share more mental models in common with other women than some others. There are cultural models, right? Cultural beliefs that I hold because I'm an Indian, because I'm an Asian. So while there might be certain mental models that are common to certain groups, there are still several associations and models that I have in my head which no one else has, and therefore every individual has a completely unique configuration of ideas, associations, beliefs, learnings stored out there inside their mind, through the basis of which, and that influences their lens, through the basis of which they process the information that comes in, and therefore they give their own unique meaning to what they perceive. Does that influence their action? Absolutely. What else influences our action other than the meanings that we derive from the context that we are in and the meanings that we derive about ourselves? So that is the idea of subjective reality. It's very humbling, but it's also very liberating. It's humbling because I need to accept that I can never know everything about what's out there. I can never know the reality. I will always have access to my version of the reality. It's liberating because it makes reality itself fluid in a way. It makes my experience fluid. It gives me more influence over my experience. Why? Because if I can have influence over what's inside my head, my mental models, my basic associations, if I can influence these, if I can be a little picky, choosy and clever about these, I can actually influence my lens, I can influence what sort of information comes in, what sort of meaning I give to information, what sort of ways I engage in interacting with other people, interacting with the world, and thereby I can actually land up crafting my experiences far more than just believing that it's something that is happening out there to me. Rather, I'm co-creating my experiences by working and crafting on my own inner reality, my own inner world.